Today we're going to talk about finding bass without electronics. Okay, to find bass without electronics, I've got two questions that I'm going to ask myself, and especially if I'm going to a new body of water. Number one, what is the primary forage base? And number two, what is the main composition of the lake or the main ecosystem of the lake? And let me explain that a little bit. Maybe the lake is all weeds, it's mainly vegetation, or it could be mainly standing timber, or maybe it's just rock. I need to know what that primary composition is, because that's going to help me figure out what I don't want to fish. Okay, first let's start with the forage. What is it? Well, I want to figure out what it is so I can match its size and match the color pattern the best I can. Now, as far as color pattern, the clearer the water, the more accurate I like to be. If the water's got some stain to it or dirty water, I'm going to throw your solid colors, your black, blues, obviously. But I want to know, is the primary forage threadfin shad? Well, if that's the case, the size is going to be much different than gizzard shad or even sunfish. Is the primary forage yellow perch? Well, if that's the case, the color pattern of my lures are going to be quite different than if it's mainly alewives. So understanding that primary forage base can really ramp up the ability to find fish without electronics. Okay, so I've got it figured out as far as what the forage is going to be like, and now let's talk about that primary composition of the lake. So I'm going to start looking in places where I find something different. I just had a video about this post a few weeks ago, and I can link to it. So if I've got a ton of weeds, a ton of vegetation, I want something that's different. Is there a big rock out there? Is there a dock sitting over that vegetation? Is there a brush pile out there? I'm going to focus on that different stuff. As a matter of fact, on some rocky lakes and impoundments, I will just put the trolling motor on high and shoot right on down the bank and only target the laydowns. It's such a good way to locate fish because they're hanging on something that is different. There's multiple forms of cover in one place, and that is a key factor to locating fish, especially without electronics. Okay, now let's jump back to the forage. The other thing that I'm going to look at if I'm not using electronics to find bass is I want to take the wind into consideration. And if you follow this channel for a while, you've heard me say this a lot. Start where the wind is really hitting the bank the best. A lot of times we try to avoid the wind because it's easier for boat positioning, easier to cast. Find where that wind is hammering. The zooplankton, the microorganisms are going to be pushed in that area. The smaller prey species, your minnows and your shad, are going to be in that area feeding on those. And when you've got all that food there, you know that the predators are going to be there as well. Not just the bass, but your walleye and your northern, all that type of stuff. So locate where the wind is hitting that bank. And without electronics, you can just tell yourself, you know what, the wind's pounding this shoreline. That food chain is going to get going. This is a good place to be. And I see this all the time, and I catch myself doing this, is when you catch one, stop and fish that area over carefully. It's so easy to catch a 2-pounder, put it back in the lake, and keep on moving. Well, bass can get in some massive groups, and you want to fish that area over thoroughly. I'll never forget when I was fishing with Mark Davis, a Major League Fishing pro, down on his home lake, Lake Washita, Arkansas. And we were looking for schools of summer bass out on ledges. And he caught one little fish on a deep diving crankbait. It was maybe pound and a half, 2 pounds at the most. And he told me, he goes, Steve, he goes, we got him. And I was looking at him like, what are you talking about? What do you mean we got him? Well, for the next 30 to 45 minutes, we just hammered those fish one after another. And when the crankbait bite died down, we picked up a Carolina rig and started to catch them all over again. It would have been so easy to have that little pound and a half fish and just drop it back in and just not even think twice about it. So if you're not using electronics, use that bass that bit to kind of maybe be the one that's like, hey, there's a whole bunch more of us down here. Really, really important. And the last thing to do as far as locating bass without electronics, when you're fishing visible cover, go ahead and approach it this way. Fish it out, the outer edges, then fish the upper part of the water column, and then get into that lay down tree and fish the bottom part of the water column. So out, up, down is the way I like to approach it. And when you're not using electronics, where you could, have a 360 imaging and be like, oh, they're sitting, suspending partway down, or oh, they're right there on the bottom under this brush. When you do that, when you hit out and then up and then down, when you're fishing that visible cover, it's going to really help you identify what part of the water column that those fish are sitting in. And that's a great, great way to approach it, because you're trying to deduce where they're at, especially when you don't have electronics. If you'd like to watch a video that goes into more depth about dissecting and breaking apart cover in that out, up, and down process, go ahead and check this video out right here. And hey, don't forget to encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.